Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Beyond ActivePerl ActivePython webinar, where we're going to talk about universal package management in the ActiveState platform and what the future of Perl and Python is on the ActiveState platform. So obviously, if you don't know about ActiveState, ActiveState's been around in open source for over 20 years, going all the way back to Perl on Windows, and being a founding member of the Python Software Foundation, and all the way through to working with pretty much 97% of the Fortune 1000. So, providing enterprise solutions for Perl and Python and Tickle throughout those times. But today we'll be primarily focused on our Perl and Python distributions and what the future of those is. So just a quick way of intro. I'm Pete Garson. I'm Director of Product here at ActiveState, and joining me today is Dana Crane, our Product Marketing Manager.
Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to the webinar.
So just a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, you can ask questions in the Q&A tab, and we'll do our best to answer them during the webinar. At the end, there'll be a dedicated slot for Q&A. And then also sometimes throughout the webinar, they may be answered via text in the thing, so you'll get a notification about that. We're also going to have a poll midway through and a survey afterwards. Your feedback's super valuable to help us improve these, so please take a minute to fill out the survey afterwards. And then in the middle, you'll be able to see the poll and be able to vote on the question as we go through. The recording and the slides of this will be available afterwards, so you'll get notified about when those things become available, and you can review this at your leisure. So if you're coming in a bit late or whatever, then that's fine. You can always watch what came before, or if you have to leave early, you can always watch what came after in the recording. All right, so talking through our agenda today, we're going to mainly be talking about why we're sunsetting ActivePerl and ActivePython community editions. Why are we moving away from those sort of tried and true community editions, and what does the future look like? So we're going to talk about that, and Dana's going to walk you through what that looks like. And then we're going to sort of look through how the ActiveState platform solves a lot of these one-size-fits-all problems that we'll raise, and give you a demo of what the ActiveState platform looks like, and how you can basically replicate what you had before with the community editions using the platform, but in a much more robust, flexible, customizable, and secure way. And so, so with that, I think that I will probably hand that over to Dana and to take us through, why we're sunsetting Perl and Python. So over to you, Dana.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, we are here today to talk about retiring ActivePerl and ActivePython. That's the community edition you guys are very familiar with over the last 20 years. And what we're doing is we're replacing it with something we call ActiveState Perl and ActiveState Python. Now, instead of being a one-size-fits-all with hundreds of different packages already pre-built for you, what we're going to give you with ActiveState Perl and ActiveState Python is really just a version of the language plus our state tool. Now, our state tool is just, is just our command line interface that you can use to install any of the packages you need for your project. So if you've used Perl Package Manager, PPM, before, it works very similar to that. And like Pete said, they'll be doing a demo to give you guys an idea of exactly how that works. And those languages plus the state tool are available today for Windows, Linux, and we're doing a beta right now on our Mac OS. But you can get them directly from the ActiveState platform. Now you can use that command line version and work straight from the command line, or as you can see over here on the right, you can also log into our web-based GUI and use it. It gives you a pretty comprehensive view of everything you're building here. Also gives you some clues as to the security status of your existing runtime as you're building it. So with that said, we have removed all versions of ActivePerl and ActivePython from our website. You can no longer download and get those anymore. we're not making that decision lightly. We understand fully that this has been a tried and true mechanism for a lot of developers out there over the last 20 years. Millions of users worldwide have downloaded this, have really enabled our business. So thank you guys very much for the last 20 years helping us create a community around ActivePerl and ActivePython. But we're moving forward from there. We understand, as we've seen over the last 20 years, that these one-size-fits-all kind of distributions have advantages, but they also have their disadvantages. And that's what I want to talk about today. Some of the disadvantages that we've seen over the last 20 years is that developers tend to install and forget these things. And in that way, they very quickly become outdated and compromise security. That's a huge problem, especially given where the market has trended over the last 18 months, because they offer such a large attack surface for hackers who are starting to target the development environment. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We've also seen complaints about license conflicts, where a lot of the licenses in those 400 or so packages you install with ActivePython or ActivePerl tend to conflict with the overall license of your code base. And we've seen a lot of corruption that can happen as people upgrade from one version to another. Given the way that it always installs in a global environment, it can become very prone to corruption. So let's take those one at a time, dive in a little bit more. When it comes to vulnerabilities, you can see I've got a couple of screenshots here from the ActiveState Platform that talk about, older versions of ActivePerl and ActivePython. So you can see here ActivePerl 528. It's not too bad, only one critical, probably about a dozen vulnerabilities altogether. But if you're on an ActivePython, older version of it, ActivePython 3.8, it's got hundreds, literally hundreds of vulnerabilities associated with it. This is what, a year and a half, 2 years after it first came out. So that's a lot of vulnerabilities to handle if you're going to try and remediate them all. But if you just downloaded and installed it, you would be instantly vulnerable to a lot of these hacks that we're seeing nowadays. Maybe next slide, Pete, where you can see over the last 18 months or so, there's been a huge spike in the way that bad actors are now targeting development environments rather than targeting production environments. And we've seen this increase because it's a very simple way to leverage. When you manage to compromise the development environment of a software supplier, as we've seen famously with SolarWinds or with CodeCov or even with the NetBeans IDE hack, what you're able to do is get in and insert malicious code into a software update or maybe a patch or the next version of your software. And by hacking only one software supplier, you can then expose all of their downstream customers to that same hack. So by targeting one single supplier, you can actually access thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of customers by embedding a malicious backdoor in a patch or a software update, which your customers are going to trust from you as a trusted vendor and just install blindly. So that's the kind of situation we find ourselves in right now. 18 months ago, that was kind of developing. In the last year, there's been a 650% increase in those kinds of attacks, as you can see from the diagram here. This is one of the reasons why supply chain security has become a real buzzword out there. And it's one of the reasons that we think the ActiveState platform can really help you guys lock down and provide security for your runtime environments. Next slide, Pete. But even if you're not a security wonk, the cost of doing all these vulnerabilities comes back to you. If you have to remediate all the vulnerabilities, as we saw with ActivePython, a couple of hundred vulnerabilities, that all takes time to investigate, time to remediate, time to patch, time to retest, rebuild, redeploy. All that adds up over time. And we know that on average, and here's a report from Dynatrace, but on average, about 30% of developer or if you have dedicated software security teams, 30% of their time is spent remediating those vulnerabilities, which can really add up over time. More than $1.5 million on average per year is the cost to the organization of being able to maintain those vulnerabilities and remediate them. Next slide, Pete. We talked a little bit about license conflicts. Now, some of you may have experienced this, but typically what happens if your software is going to be shipped, you might experience a delay because the lawyers need to get involved, review those licenses, make sure those open source licenses are up to date. If you've inserted something along the way that hasn't been pre-approved, it may need to delay your shipping before it actually gets out the door. Other companies actually do a year-end audit, which exposes them to organizational risk. If you shipped something earlier in the year, but don't have your audit until the end of the year, you're obviously going to incur some risk depending on what you've shipped out to your customers. And finally, I don't know what, I've certainly experienced this, need a new package brought in to do something, and it's got to go through the lawyers first, and that can always cause delay before you can get your hands on that package to be able to push your software development forward. So again, avoiding delays by reducing the size of your runtime environment can really help ship things a lot smoother and a lot easier. Next slide, Pete. So finally, let's talk a little bit about environment corruption. Here's a great XKCD diagram that talks about what it's like for the Python world, but certainly other open source languages are not immune to this. In the Python world, there's been a lot of different solutions to try and help with this problem, but it seems like the more solutions we introduce, the more complex it becomes and the more likely we are to corrupt things. And that's all because we tend to work with global environments rather than virtual environments. Global environments are notoriously hard to upgrade and can very easily become corrupted. It's always frustrating when your packages can no longer be found. You have to go looking for path environment variables to update. But we've moved with the platform to virtual environments, and Pete will show you how that works. And that can really help limit the amount of corruption going on. And we have mechanisms behind that to help ensure that you understand when you upgrade exactly the risk you're going to be entailing. So this is why we built the ActiveState platform in the first place. We wanted to be able to get ActivePython ActivePerl out to you guys as quickly as possible. It used to take months at a time. Now we can build everything from source in just a few minutes. So like Pete said, if those of you who still want to work with very large runtime environments, go ahead. You can use the ActiveState platform to rebuild something that looks like ActivePython or ActivePerl. It's very simple to do. We bring in all of our source code, vet it, and then build it on demand from source to make sure that everything you build is secured, contains no malicious code, contains no backdoors, contains no malware in there. So you can always be sure that what you're deploying is secure. Now, vulnerabilities are going to happen, but the platform also provides a way to help you automate that vulnerability remediation. Pete's going to give you a look at that and see how simple it is to quickly remediate your vulnerabilities and then rebuild your environment so you can redeploy it very, very quickly, rather than the sort of days to weeks it might take to update an environment today. And then finally, we help you comply with security and licensing policies. We're starting to expose some of the licensing associated with your runtime. And in the near future, we'll also be providing policies to make sure that you can adhere to those security and licensing policies for your organization as well. Next slide, Pete. So in the end, what you end up with is a single central source of truth for your runtime environment located on the ActiveState platform. And that allows you to download and install it locally on your system and update it independently, and then push any kinds of updates back to the server, back to the ActiveState platform, where everyone who needs that runtime environment can then go ahead and update their local environment just by doing a poll. So it allows your dev team, your QA team, your DevOps, everybody to be standardized on the runtime environment, which reduces your any kind of issues that might come up from having different environments. But it also allows your compliance and InfoSec teams to have a look in to make sure that everything's kosher, that you're on the right versions of packages, that licenses are all aligned, and everything is good. Next slide, Pete. So some of the advantages you can get from using the ActiveState platform: number one, a secure supply chain. So I talked about all of the dev environment hacks that we're seeing these days. What we're doing with the ActiveState platform is bringing in the source code, vetting it to make sure it's appropriate, and then building everything from source to make sure it doesn't contain anything malicious. If there's a vulnerability, we can help you speed that vulnerability remediation, resolve it and rebuild, and then redeploy the environment very, very quickly. We've eliminated environment corruption by moving to a virtual environment style. And if you do need to upgrade, you can actually see the cascade of all changes that are going to happen to your environment before you make that upgrade. So, for example, if there's a conflict in your dependency management, it'll warn you of that conflict and even suggest a workaround for you. And that's part of our automated dependency resolution that we offer on the platform. It really helps you eliminate that dependency hell some of you may have experienced before. And then finally, we provide you with a software bill of materials so that you can see everything from top-level dependencies to transitive dependencies to OS-level dependencies. Everything that happens in your runtime environment is exposed to you, so you can understand every component within it and create a software bill of materials yourself if you need to ship that off to your customers. So with that said, I'd like to take a poll at this time. So hopefully you'll see that pop up. And I really want you guys to tell me how much time you spend maintaining your environments. So whether that's maintaining it or upgrading it or troubleshooting or remediating things in that environment, what kind of time on average does your team spend doing those routines? And maybe you actually have a dedicated team. Maybe your own development team doesn't do it. Maybe you have a dedicated separate team that does it. Let us know. So if the poll has popped up for you, just click on one of those radio buttons, 0%, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, or 50% or more, and let us know what you think. I'll just give you guys a minute to do that. Looks like we've got quite a few answers coming in right now. All right. All right, we should be good. It looks like most of you are in the 10 to 20% bucket. So that can be quite a lot of overhead for some of your teams. That's one of the things that we think the ActiveState platform can help you with. Now, when you're next slide, please, Pete. So when you're adopting the ActiveState platform, you want to be able to keep in mind that there are quite a bit of differences between what you've been using before with ActivePerl and ActivePython and what you'll be looking at when you use the ActiveState platform. So instead of pre-built distributions that you can one-click install, what we're talking about is building a custom environment specifically for your project. And instead of having it installed globally, we'll be installing it into a virtual environment instead. Rather than having pre-built packages, we'll be building everything from source on the fly for you. So those who are familiar with PPM, again, it looks exactly the same way. Issuing that command from the command line and then having it build on the ActiveState platform and then download and install locally for you. People show you that in the demo. And then finally, these aren't static environments that you install and leave alone. These are dynamic environments that continue to be updated or allow you to continually update and remediate as necessary. And that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Pete and the platform demo.
Thanks, Dana. So yeah, so like Dana said, I will walk you through how to use some of these features of the ActiveState platform. So what you're probably used to today is going to the ActiveState website and you go to one of the download pages and you click the download button. And historically, you would have just downloaded, you know, a large installer that contained all the packages for you. But like Dana said, once you install that, it's going to go stale pretty quickly and become vulnerable. And, you know, the pace of updates is really, really fast these days with these packages. So instead, now what you're going to see when you go through there is, you know, you're going to go to the download page and you're going to click on one of those buttons. And the first thing you're going to need to do right now, just so you can keep track of all of the different runtime environments you're going to be building, is to sign up for an account. And so it's very simple. If you have a GitHub account, you can sign up using your GitHub credentials, and that will sign you up and link that account immediately. But if not, what we can do is we can sign up for everyone here. So we'll sign up for a thing here. And so we'll use our username and we'll say we're going to be, there we go, that's available. And then we'll let this choose a password for us and we'll create an account. So it's really pretty easy to do. And so I've created an account, and now the first thing it's going to ask me here is whether I'm working together, whether on a team or on my own. And that's something that I think is a huge benefit of the ActiveState platform, is that it makes it easier to keep environments synchronized as a team, right? So if you're working in a large organization and you need everybody to have the exact same environment and to stay secure at all points, then that lets you, you can do this and to sign up for the team. Right now, we'll just do it on our own kind of thing, because we're just doing a demo here, a simple one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to select a language. And so for now, we're going to create Perl. And you can see that we've got a few options here. And so this is not really that different than, say, you know, whether just choosing which button on the website you would have chosen before, which version you want. Or if you've, you know, ever run a Windows installer and you can install specific components while you're doing an install of a particular program. This is essentially the same idea here, right? Where I say I want Perl, I'm going to choose the latest version, which is recommended. And for now, I'll build this on Linux kind of thing. And so this is my project here, Perl 534, and we'll call it webinar test. And so then I just create a runtime. And what this is going to do is this is going to create now a project which contains all of the information to rebuild my own customized Perl, ActiveState Perl. And so I have a few options here. This is my overview page, which it's using to populate right now, so that which shows me, you know, the default stuff. But if I can also go to my configuration page, and that lets me configure what's going to be in my build. And so here it's automatically added a bundle of utilities, which is sort of common packages for my build here. I'm going to start somewhat cleaner here. And the other thing is also it's popped up here and it said, oh, no vulnerabilities detected kind of thing. So that means that my build is completely clean here. And so what you can see is this utilities bundle has included 14 packages, which include all of these things like data dump, data, you know, date time, this kind of stuff. And then all of its dependencies, right? And it shows you all the way down, right down to things like zlib and libxcrypt, which are C libraries that you normally might not realize that they use. So this shows me the complete set of packages that I'm going to get by adding this utilities bundle. I'm going to remove this for a second here. And I'm going to start completely fresh with just a bare Perl kind of thing. So I'm going to, one of the things you can see here that I'm doing is it's asking me to commit this change. And so I'm going to say removing utilities bundle. And so I commit this change. And so now I have nothing in my build. It's completely bare. I just have Perl 534, and it says the only dependency is this libxcrypt. Now I'm going to add something simple here. So I'm going to add, so if I dbd MySQL, say. And what you can do is when I'm searching for a package to add from the library, which encompasses almost all of CPAN, like you can get pretty much everything, or if you're working in Python, it encompasses probably most of PyPI. And so I can choose from a whole bunch of different versions, right? And just to give you an example, I'll choose this version here. Let's say for whatever reason I needed that version. And so I've added my dbd MySQL to my project here. And so I'll just say adding dbd MySQL, and I'll commit that again, right? So it's very similar to source control, right? If you've ever used Git, if you've used, SVN, whatever, what you're doing is a series of commits to the source control, which log all the changes. And we'll look at that in a second. So now I've added dbd MySQL, but one of the things you might notice here is that now I have vulnerabilities in my project. And so I've got, a critical vulnerability here in dbd MySQL. Well, I don't want a critical vulnerability in my thing. I might not care about mediums, I might not care about lows kind of thing, but I definitely care about critical vulnerabilities. And so it's just as simple as choosing a version. When I go through the dropdown here, I can see versions that have CVEs versus versions that don't have CVEs. And those things are usually marked, like over here, you can see it says 0 CVEs with the little green dot kind of thing. And then down here, while it's populating kind of thing, it's loading for all the versions right now. It will load those little markers. But maybe what I want to do is just choose auto kind of thing. And then auto will select a version for me that's usually the latest one. And in this case, you can see it now has 0 CVEs. You can see my critical vulnerability has gone away there. And so I'll just note this, remediating critical. And so that's the change that I've made there. And why are we doing this with the commit history? And why is that such an important part? Is that if I go here to my history, now I have a complete audit trail of every change I've made to this environment. So you can see, here's where I started a few minutes ago with utilities and Perl and Linux. You can see here where I removed the utilities bundle. It says that it was done by me, and there's a specific hash to this build. Here's where I added dbd MySQL, and here's where I changed the version to auto. So it has a complete history of this. And what you can do then is if I need to reproduce a specific build, I need to go back in time and I need to say, oh, you know what? I need to get back to before I had a dbd MySQL kind of thing. Well, I can go here and I can view the project at this commit. And now you can see there's my blank project again, right? And if I wanted to permanently go back to that project, right, I could click the revert to this commit, and that will, make that the state of the world. In my case, I want to go back to what I did before with my dbd MySQL. I go switch to latest, and now I'm back to my latest commit here. And so now what you can see there is that I've got a complete audit trail and a complete, like Dana said, bill of materials of everything that's in everything that's in my build, every change that I've made, who's made it, and at what point. And I can always go back so that I can switch between versions very, very simply. And so how do I download and how do I install this now? Well, now it's very simple. So now I go to my download builds. In this case, it's already done building. It's rebuilt. When I configured this, it rebuilt this entire thing from source. And I can go here and I can inspect all the build logs. So I can see like, oh, it built curl here. what does my build log look like? And I can go through and it shows me all the compiler outputs. So I can see exactly what happened. And it shows me that it's built all of these things from source on demand. So I know where the stuff is coming from, where my bits are coming from. But to install it, now we have a command line thing called the state tool, which allows you to both like install these builds, but also manage them, update them. And like we said, if you were a previous Perl user and you were familiar with PPM, works pretty much exactly the same as that. And so let's do this right now. So I've done this. I'm just going to double make sure that my terminal window is visible. So Dana, can you confirm that you can see my terminal window there?
You're good to go, Pete.
Okay. So I will, in my terminal window, just paste that. I copy and pasted that command line. And so I'm going to run that right now. And what it's going to do is, in my Docker container here, I don't have this state tool installed. So it's downloading the state tool and installing that right for me right now. And it says here, like the state tool lets me install and manage my language runtimes. And so what that does, it's a tool that allows me to do a lot more with my language runtimes than I was doing before. And so you can see it's downloading all the packages, installing them right now, and there it's done. So it's gone. It's gotten that version of Perl that I just created that has the DBD MySQL, and it's installed it here. And so now I'm in the virtual environment kind of thing, right? So this is installed in a way that's sandboxed, right? And so all the changes that I make to this only happen to this version of Perl. If I was working and I had multiple versions, let's say I had a development environment and a production environment, or I had project A and project B that had slightly different sets of dependencies, I can switch between them super easily. And we'll demonstrate that in a little bit here. But right now I'm in the state tool. So you can see all this Perl -v. You can see there's Perl version 534. You can, binary build provided by ActiveState. So that's the version here. Obviously, if I'm not in my virtual environment, then Perl wouldn't be present here, I don't think. So deactivated. Oh, it is right, because also it's installed as the default environment. So one of the things you can do is you can choose one of your virtual environments to be your default environment. So it will be always available to you by just typing Perl. But if you want to switch between them, you just use this command, state activate. And so if you have, I'm currently in the directory, sorry, there's my directory right here, Perl 534 webinar test. So I'm in this folder which has a configuration file called an ActiveState.yaml, which has some information about this project that I've created, some metadata. And so if I just type the state activate, state activate, then it will, now it's enabled this version of Perl. And so this is the version of Perl that I'm using. And so what we all want to do is, if you were previously a PPM user and you want to install a package, so let's say datetime, just for example, instead of typing PPM install, I just type state install and I'll go datetime. And so now what it's going to do is it's going to go to the platform and say, oh, okay, I've got to find datetime on the platform. I'm going to build that from source for you. And generally speaking, it's probably going to be cached kind of thing, right? So it would have, it's going to be already cached. So it's really just going to download it and install it essentially. And so what it's done is it's said here, like datetime has 6 dependencies for a combined total of 36 dependencies. It shows me what the individual dependencies are there. And then it's showing me that it actually is building one thing here. There's my following along for the progress in detail. I can tail that file if I want, but it's building one thing, which we can maybe go back and see. While it's building, while it's building there, I can go over and try something else. Just click over. Go back to the page here. right. So just going to flip there. I just interrupted it. It's going to continue in the background there for me. So what I'm going to do though, while we're waiting for that to finish building, is I'm going to exit out of this and I'm going to install a different version of Perl just to demonstrate switching between the environments really quickly. And so if I go state activate, and then I go ActiveState Perl at 532 here, then what it's going to do is it's going to clone a different, go and grab a different version of Perl, download it, unpack it kind of thing. And now I'm in here. And so now if you saw before when I said Perl -v, you can see that now this is Perl 532 subversion, this built for x86, blah, 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 blah. But this is a different version than I just had. And anything that I do in this environment is not going to impact my other environment. So if I go here and I go state install datetime, this is going to be a completely different installation of datetime that's not in the Perl 534 version. Right.
You might want to shrink your window a little bit. It looks like it might be a little long.
Oh, am I off the screen?
A little bit on the bottom there.
Okay, let me move my screen a little bit here. Hold on, I need to move my zoom bar. How's that, Dana? Can you see it now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, so this one finished here. So one of the things you can see is that I just added datetime to this Perl 532 environment that I switched to, and it was pretty much instantaneous, right? So now I have datetime installed, right? So I can type a command called state history, right? Pretty much all the things that I can do on the command line or on the desktop there, I can do on the command line. And so what you can see is that I've added datetime here. It's marked as local because just like with ppm or with any other, like with Git, all the changes that I make initially are local to my machine only. If I want to push this to another user on the platform, I have to use the state push. So, but we have to go back to our other project there that we were using before to demonstrate. So this is what you can see is I'm in the 532 environment. I can exit out of that. Now I'm in this here. And it's activating. Oh, and it's still trying to, you can see here, it's trying to pick up the build log from 534 in datetime, which it is still building, which is sort of, so because it's still building, I will break out of that. And what I will do is I'll use a different thing very quickly to demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back really quickly, and I'm going to make a very basic Python project here and demonstrate something for Python. So I'm going to go create Python 396 Linux 396 webinar, create a runtime. So I've got Python here, and I'm going to go over here to download builds. So I've got a new build, and let's just quickly install our Python. Oh, hold on. It is. Just going to grab this quickly. Sorry. And so it's going to create the virtual environment for my Python project. It's going to install all my Python stuff here really quickly. And so now I'm in my Python environment. So now I'll state install something basic like requests for Python. It's going to go grab requests, install this package, and then what I'll do is I'll push it to the platform so you can see my change. Assuming that it's not live demo and bandwidth is being weird, so I'm not sure why it's being hanging like that from my Python. It must be rebuilding something. Just give it 1 second here. Oops, where did my window go? Sorry. Oh, there it goes. It's just taking a brief second, 8 of 9, and then we'll just give it hopefully 9 of 9 here. And so one of the things that I said before is that you can always have in your overview page, you can get the downloads instantaneously here, right? So it says main branch, Linux, I can click install, and it will always give me this command line, which I can just copy and paste. If I'm on Windows, it gives me a command that I need to paste into my command.exe, and that will install things that way. And if you're on Mac OS kind of thing, the same thing where you just paste it into your terminal window. So, okay, so this is almost done here. Building, installing. So this is, it finished installing requests there. So then, like I said, I'll say state history to show you that this is my basic project that I just created, my Python one, and it has requests where I've added it. You'll notice up here, when I click on history, it doesn't show the requests yet. So what I'll do right now is just go state push, and oh, it's going to make me log in. So I need to sign in here and very quickly. Okay, do I remember my name? No, my name is, hold on. Log in, webinar. I didn't have webinar test. That's the thing. State push. Geez, why did it fail to authenticate me? That's weird. Okay. 1 second. Live demos. Okay, that's weird that it's failing to authenticate. I'll just quickly. I will create a new project with my changes right now. Yeah. So I've just created a new project here, which I can just copy and paste this into my web browser. And you can see, the key thing you can see is now it reflects my requests being added on the command line. Apologies for my authentication issues there. So basically now you can see I've got auto requests that added via the command line, synchronized with my web project. I was able to switch between Perl 532, Perl 534 environments sort of seamlessly, add things into my projects from both command line and the dashboard, and remediate vulnerabilities, all pretty easily and all like synchronized across various projects and various orgs. So I know I went a little bit over on my demo there because of some bandwidth and auth issues. So why don't we switch back and move on to some questions here. Really quickly before we get to questions, we'll just talk a little bit about some licensing changes that are part of this. So the old licensing terms had ActivePerl and ActivePython free for development use, and you had to pay to move them into production use. The new licensing terms features open source licensing rather than ActiveState's proprietary licensing. So the bits that you download are licensed under the original terms that they were licensed under with the open source licensing. And it's free for individual use. So you can have one active runtime, so one runtime in use at any given time. But for production use, and if you want to have more than one at any given time, we have a team tier and an enterprise tier. And so you would have to move up to those if you're working with a team where you need to have multiple people running the same environment simultaneously, or you need commercial support and all kinds of other features. All right, so let's just mindful of the time here. Let's move on to the questions. So Avery, do we have some questions in the hopper here? Okay, if I look onto the questions here, there's a bunch of questions here. I don't know where we want to start, kind of thing. And was there one from earlier as well?
We can start at the top there, Pete. Sean asked, to confirm the sunsetting of ActivePerl community editions does not impact ActivePerl subscriptions.
Well, it does impact ActivePerl subscriptions.
That's exactly what we're talking about here. Yes.
Yeah, it does impact ActivePerl subscriptions. But if you have a subscription and you have a license kind of thing, you can continue to use the version that you have installed kind of thing. But obviously we are not, maintaining those moving into the future. And there won't be like new versions of those old community edition bundles. You'll be able though to create a custom project. And if you need to replicate that environment, you can replicate it in the same way I just did in the demo. Okay, why don't we move on to the next one, which is a common one we hear, which is my company does not allow internet access from the servers where we run our Perl programs. Can you install the state tool without an internet connection? And so, well, you definitely need an internet connection to install it because you need to download it from the server. Can you use it without an internet connection? You can, in a way. You can't use it to use like the manage your build without an internet connection. So the stuff that you saw me doing, like state install or state activate or et cetera, that stuff you can't do without an internet connection, but there are some things that you can do. There is a deployment method that's possible using the state tool. There's a deploy command, and you can use that if you need to deploy your runtime environment into something that doesn't have internet access. So if you're on some kind of production server that doesn't have internet access, or you have some other environment where you don't have internet access, you can use that command to get your runtime deployed in a situation like that. The next anonymous attendee says, can I continue to use my current installed version of ActivePerl? yes, with the caveat that depending on what your use case is, you may have to purchase a license. That's going to be specific to your particular use case in your environment. So, if depending on, first of all, like how many you have installed, whether you're using it, just personally kind of thing versus in a commercial situation, but if you do have, like we said for the earlier question, if you do have a subscription and you already have it installed, you can continue to use it. All right. As an independent developer, what are the licensing considerations when building an app on a customer's computer? If you're building an app that is it depends on the situation. So obviously we have certain situations where if you're building an app, there are OEM distribution fees the same way there used to be, if you're redistributing. But because the things are licensed under the open source licensing terms, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not have licensing considerations. It depends on your use case. That's the question from Bill there. It's gonna depend on what you mean. What's the app kind of thing? Is that deployed to anyone? Is it just somebody's? Are they using it locally? Is it hosted on a server? Is that redistributed to other people? There are a number of things to consider with that situation, but it depends if you're like, it depends on what you're redistributing and how you're redistributing it. Unfortunately, without more detail, so I'd encourage you to reach out to our team afterwards, and we can get you a more detailed answer based on your specific use case. Thing. The next one is asking, is this the same for ActiveTickle now? I'm having a hard time installing that. So right now, ActiveTickle still is available as a community edition. Eventually, ActiveTickle will move to this same distribution method where you're using the state tool and the platform. Because it's not fully compatible quite yet, it is still available in its sort of traditional download kind of thing. If you are having problems installing it, I encourage you to go to community.activestate.com and sign into the forums to get assistance there. We're happy to help you out. That's right now you should be able to just install it the same way you did before. It won't install via the state tool currently. So the next person says, is Perl 528 the last version of Perl ActiveState is putting out? No. Like as you saw, I just installed Perl 534. I also installed Perl 532. And so all of the ActiveState will continue putting out Perl. Every version that's available will be available on the ActiveState platform. And currently, basically, the entire CPAN library is available for me to customize with my build. It's just that we won't be curating a all-in-one build and distributing that in a redistributable installer like an MSI, like an all-in-one installer anymore. Now, we're providing you the tools and access to this curated library to be able to create your own custom distribution for all the reasons that Dana went over earlier in the webinar. Yeah. So the next question on licensing, you manage licenses for dependencies like Qt licensing for PyQt. So we actually, this is an interesting question. We have a number of enterprise clients who do have Qt licensed in their builds, but that including a commercially licensed module like Qt to go along with PyQt is definitely something that you need to talk to sales about, and is not supported in the free tier of things you need to be on. But it is it is available to enterprise clients. We do that pretty regularly. The next person says, how do you figure out what packages you are using to be able to figure out what to build? Right. So depending on how your application is structured, you may have a manifest file, like a thing called like a cpan file, or if you're in Python, like a pyproject.toml or a requirements.txt that contains all of the things that are included as dependencies in your project. But generally speaking, anything that you are importing, you would have to have used. If you're coming from a situation, depending on what language you're using, you can figure it out in different ways. Again, that's one I probably would encourage you to go to the community forum and ask for help there with more specifics, and somebody might be able to assist you. But generally speaking, your manifest file is a good place that will list the things that are in your project. And we do have the ability on the platform to import directly from manifest files like requirements.txt or cpan file. All right. Moving on to another question here. So if I have a Python script that runs Perl scripts, if I'm in a Python environment, which Perl will be invoked if I just run Perl? Okay, so it depends. That's really specific. It depends on how you have things configured. It depends on how things you have. If you have the Perl defined as your default environment, it will invoke the version that you have set as your default. And that's the version that will run when you type Perl. Moving forward on the roadmap, we will support multi-language builds so that you can have Python and Perl within the same project. That's not available currently. It's coming soon. Okay. Some other questions here. Can you build in the TK interface and the Excel modules? Yes, I'm pretty sure TK, the TK and Excel modules, pretty much everything that's available in either PyPI or cpan, like pretty much the entire language ecosystems, are available to build. So you can choose pretty much anything you want. Like I said, you go on there, if you open the add packages modal there, you can type in anything you want and it will appear. So and you can also use the import module if you have a specific list, specific versions. You can choose the import from either cpan file or requirements. Can you compile to distribute? That's same as the question I answered earlier, which is it depends kind of thing. And so if you're looking to redistribute, you should reach out and talk, and we can discuss it more. It's kind of complicated. Yeah. Will Komodo tools still be available or merge into the ActiveState platform? So Komodo is still available and is open source kind of thing, and so but is no longer available for sale kind of thing. So it is not necessarily merged in. It is still available though to download. Okay, what if I want a large standard distribution like the ActivePython or ActivePython? Can I still get one? So while we are not, you can. So while you can't go and get the MSI, you can just go to the like the project exists on the platform that includes all of those files. We can go over here right now, and I can just really quickly show you. If I go just to, so I'm just shortcutting some stuff here. So if I just go here to the ActiveState organization, and I choose, like in this case, ActivePerl 528, and go to configuration. It's all here. And you can, if you want all the packages, the list of everything that's in there is there. And I mean, you can click this fork button to create your own version of this project. And then you can continue to update it as time goes on. The same is true if you want to make your own custom one. You can start by just adding whatever things that you want to that distribution. And this is ultimately what we'd love to see the community do, which is have different flavors of this ActivePerl and ActivePython. Okay, I know we're at time, but I'll answer a few more because we don't have that many left. So what happens if you use the platform but install a particular module using a tool like cpan? Will it create a conflict of some kind? We definitely would recommend that you use the state tool to do that, because for instance, anything that if you use cpan or pip or anything like that when you're installing, it's not going to be reflected on the web dashboard. So it won't be reflected for any kind of other team members. That's only going to be impacting your local environment. So you definitely would prefer that you should use the state tool so that everybody remains in sync and so that it's fully resolving your dependencies and figuring all that stuff out. Okay, next. Can you browse the full list of modules to view and select if you don't know the exact name? Can you show how, as we did with ppm for Perl? So you can search the way, you can't browse the entire thing. It's quite large. You probably wouldn't want to just browse. There's like hundreds of thousands of things in there, I think. But you can search. So you can search with only, you don't have to type in the exact module name. So when I did that, when I went over here and I went into my project and I clicked, where's this? Sorry, my Zoom window. I can just type in like a partial match, and it will find everything that like matches that partially, right? So you can see here's this giant list of anything. So you don't need to know the entire name to be able to find that stuff. Okay, and then finally, this is probably the last one because we're definitely over time. Was there an announcement doc released for this change? If so, where can I find it? There is a blog. There are a couple blog posts that were announcing the changes to the licensing that came out a few months ago, and there have been numerous blog posts and announcements around the state tool and the ActiveState platform in this transition kind of thing. So
I'll just jump in, Pete. You can find it by going to activestate.com/blog. One of them you might want to look for is called Goodbye Community Editions, Hello ActiveState Platform. And if you're looking for licensing, there's another blog post entitled Important Changes to ActiveState's Licensing and Pricing Model in 2021.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Kind of thing. So yeah, and so, okay, one final question here, which is if you build each time from code, how do you protect cases where older versions of packages are taken off the web? So we ingest all of those packages, and those things are, all of the source code is imported and stored in our own database kind of thing. So that's actually one of the benefits of the ActiveState platform, where if something disappears from the web, an old version, it's still available in our catalog and still available for you to build from. And so that's actually one of the benefits for why you should use this system kind of thing. All right, thank you for all the amazing questions. Really glad to answer them. Yeah, apologies for the crazy live demos bandwidth issues, but it all worked out in the end. Thanks everybody for attending, and yeah, I really encourage you to go to the ActiveState community if you need help or if you want to ask follow-up questions or learn more about this, to go to community.activestate.com to try the platform for free. It's free to sign up for an account. You saw it's actually super easy to create an account and create a project. And if you need to get more information, reach out afterwards if you have a commercial use case that a specific question that wasn't answered here, and we'll try to get you a more detailed answer based on your specific use case.
Or even if your team wants to have a look, please book a demo and we can certainly walk your team through the platform as well.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks everyone for your time. See you next time.